I always say when people are like, I find it really difficult to network, I always say like, join a clinical consultation group, join a course, join a 6-month program, join a therapist support group where there is some form of structure. I need that as an ambivert. I need the rules. I need to know how I'm meant to behave. You can't just free me out in the world.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, joined today by Tamara Howell. I'm so excited to have Tamara Howell with me today. Tamara is my business bestie, and she is such a great source of inspiration for me and support, and hates being on podcasts. So I'm so appreciative of her being here today. We all have those things we hate, right?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I actually can't believe I've managed to avoid it for this long. And I'm really happy to be here, but I do have some difficulty with podcasts usually.
Well, the thing of it is you do great on podcasts. So I know you're going to do great today. I'm happy to have
Aww.
you. So today we're going to talk about the power of networking to meet your future referrers and increase your professional community. And we're also going to talk about Tamara's ultimate collaboration opportunity for therapists. So make sure you listen to the end to hear about that. So Tamara, you have done a number of trainings on the power of networking to grow private practice and to, find referrers. But also what a lot of people don't understand is that when you're a solo private practice person, whether you're just, whether you own, if you're a solo private practice person, you're a practice owner. So they don't understand that we always need referral sources. I'm always looking for someone to refer my client's husband to or their child to. And so there's lots of ways that networking can benefit yourself as well as those future referrers. And that's sort of your zone of genius, I think.
Well, I love networking, basically. I mean, I'm not really extroverted. I consider myself an ambivert, but I love building connections. And the reason for that is because I really want to be the best referrer out there. And I think when we go into our professional relationship with the intention of being the person that has the best information and can be the best matchmaker for people finding their therapists, and can connect different professionals with each other for collaboration opportunities, for example, I think that it makes it so much easier than when we put pressure on ourselves to perform and to represent ourselves accurately. And this is true of private practice, online business, any sort of space where we feel like we have to sell our skills. Actually, if I take the perspective of learning about other people's skills and how I can support other people, it's much easier. They'll get to know me. They'll get to know my skills just through the act of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you present a perspective that's very effective. You're not calling people and saying, hey, I want to tell you all about myself so you can refer to me.
I mean, I do talk about myself, right? But in the context of the conversation, and I do find it just much easier. I mean, maybe this is why I find it difficult to go on podcasts, because I'm often the person being interviewed. And actually, I would much rather ask other people questions and learn about the context so that I can then respond with information that like my experience or my knowledge or my skill set is relevant to. And so I don't mind cold calling and cold emailing and cold pitching, because like really I want to know the information about the other person. When we have that context, I think it's much easier to insert ourselves and our experience, essentially. But it has definitely worked. For me, I've built my practice from scratch several times. I've moved countries, I've moved online, I've stopped for maternity leave and then restarted my practice. And each time, the most effective method of gaining referrals has been through direct networking.
Yeah. And so that is just one of the many benefits of doing that. You also grow your professional community. You don't feel so isolated like so many people in solo private practice do. You have more authority with your clients when they ask for a referral and I know exactly the person for you. And that's gotten harder since the pandemic. I think it's getting better now. But during the pandemic, all of my go-to sources were not taking clients. And that's one more reason why continuing to network is important. So do you typically reach out to solo practitioners versus group practices?
That's an interesting question. Yes, historically, I have usually reached out to individual practitioners. So the first time I moved to France over 10 years ago, I took a year off and then I decided to start my practice. And so I went through a huge long list of English speaking therapists and I wrote to every single one. I actually had my logo like printed in color on paper and I like typed up letters and signed everyone and I posted them to people. Maybe it was in the Middle Ages, I'm not sure, but it feels like so long ago. Because now, of course, we would just send an email. But at the time, I really wanted to like personalize it. And some of those, I think I sent over 100 messages out. I wrote to psychiatrists, to GPs, and to other therapists. And I really wanted to learn about their practice and how they built a practice in Paris, and where they rented rooms from and how they registered for tax and things like that. And I got to know all that stuff, but I also got referrals as a result of it. And actually, one of the benefits that I really didn't know about was that for years afterwards, people would meet me at, say, professional events, and they would say, "Oh, I remember when you sent me your letter. Oh, I remember when you sent me your CV. Oh, I've heard about you from this person." And sometimes, yes, people will respond to us, but other times people will just hold the information in the back of their head. And so this has become true for me in online business as well, and connecting with people online is that sometimes we don't know who knows about the work we're doing, but people will come to me and they'll say, "Oh, so-and-so told me about you." And I don't know who they're talking about, but I'm so ever so grateful for that person who came to a free webinar one time and enjoyed the work that we did together and then went and told their friends about it. So we never know. And I think this has been very much like my perspective lately, is that investing in something that gives you an immediate return does not give credit to the long-term possibilities of referral networking.
That's so important. And, and as therapists, we're all about the relationship building. And so this is should be, I'm an ambivert as well, but it should be more natural for us than maybe other business owners, because we're used to making connections with people that we don't know.
Yes. I think also there are some things that I put in place now when I'm networking to take care of like some of the anxieties that I might have usually. So I actually like going and meeting people in person, but maybe I like to speak to them a bit first or have a little email exchange with them first. I will do Zoom calls, but actually I kind of prefer to speak to people on Voxer, like asynchronously. And I like connecting with people that way as well. I also think that approaching group practices is also a great way to understand, first of all, business, but also what's available. And I remember that I talk about this quite often. I went to see a dermatologist and she told me that a therapist approached her dermatology group practice and went and visited and explained how she worked, and that they all refer to her now because people with skin conditions need emotional support, and that's a specific expertise. and having a therapist come and approach them and present on the issues that they understand that can happen. Like if I've got a skin condition, and when it flares up, I feel like I don't really want to go out, or it hurts, or this kind of thing. And so I think going and presenting creating an offering, especially to a group practice, of this is something that could be useful for everybody, can also result in referrals and ongoing professional relationships.
Absolutely. And my experience with especially GPs or people who are a tangent business to what I'm doing, like the population that I work with, most of the time, those people are desperate to know that therapist that they can refer to, that they can be like, oh yeah, I know a great therapist I can refer you to. And so those connections, outside of just other therapists, are really important as well. And I think that gets overlooked by people at times.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's some situations in which I don't say I'm a therapist, right? But there are some in which I say straight away that if I go and see a physio, if I go and see a gynecologist, if I go and see, any sort of doctor, any sort of physical therapist, if I see an acupuncturist, if I see, like, those are the situations where I say I'm a therapist, not necessarily because I want to build my practice, but because I'm going to be able to connect people, Because even when I'm not looking for clients, I still need that information. I still want more information. And I often tell the people that I'm coaching in my groups that when we have space in our practice, that's when we're active, socially, with networking. But even when our practice is full, we have to think about, like, what we call in online business churn, and that we still need a steady stream of referrals. And I think if you have 3 or 4 regular referral sources other than directories, other than SEO, then, if you maintain those 3 or 4 relationships, then that can keep your practice full once it's full.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking back to you typing up the letters and sending them out. And, while that's an old school practice, everyone's inboxes are so flooded. So I kind of feel like that might be a great throwback idea, that if you take the time to type it out or just print it out on your computer, but hand sign it, and maybe even hand address it, you're going to get more attention. And one of the things I like to tell my members that they should do when they do that is put something actionable in there. So put some type of a meditation or a breathing technique or something that you can say, oh, and I've enclosed this handy exercise that might be helpful for your clients or patients or whatever. And then, of course, you have your practice information on there. So that's another way that they can be passing along your information, even if the person isn't asking specifically for, hey, can you refer me to a therapist?
I love that idea. And I love the idea of getting more creative. So yeah, sending a letter in the post is a bit different these days. But we could also create leaflets. You could think of it as a creative opportunity. So recently I've been to an in-person conference. I'm going to go again with Therabundle. And so I had to source what I call swag, which is effectively little gifts that you give to people who walk past your exhibition stand with your branding, in order to create more visibility, in order to connect with people, in order to give people a talking point and a memory for the future. And there's no reason why we can't do that with our private practices as well. Some of the things, like I source my swag from Etsy or independent creators, essentially. So it could be, my whole thing is about sustainability and growth and nature. And so the things that I choose are things like pencils that you can plant when they get too small that turn into mint plants, or little seed pods for wildflowers, or vegan soap, or, things like that. Herbs and stuff. And so there's no reason why you couldn't do something creative like that, like a little bag of seeds with your practice name on it, and send that out, which is going to be, memorable. And I think that we will start to see people becoming more creative with that kind of thing in the future.
Yes, I love that. And this is such an ideal time to be doing that. This is for most of the members in my program, as well as not as well as myself, but most newer therapists since the pandemic have never experienced a summer slump, because we just simply weren't having that during the pandemic.
And this is the first time a lot of therapists are experiencing that, and they're scared. And so we were having a conversation in one of my groups this week that, okay, well, first of all, let's plan ahead. When you have really great business, put some of that money aside so you can pay yourself when you're sick or vacation or slow times, but also embrace that in different ways. So I embrace it as it's a little bit slower for me, and I like that. And I can afford financially for me to see less clients for short periods of time here and there. But also that's the time where I'm going to do my continuing ed credits. I'm going to network with other people. I'm going to do the things that we just simply don't have time for. Maybe catch up on some admin tasks, some things like that. And looking at that as, instead of, oh no, everyone's canceling, like, oh great, I have this time to do these things that I'm always like putting on my to-do list and never getting to.
Absolutely. I think, what I encourage people to do is like decide my working hours. This is how I do it. I decide my working hours. And then if those working hours are not filled with live calls, either online therapy or coaching, then I still use those hours for work, because otherwise I'm going to have to use other hours that aren't allocated for work. So for networking, what I often recommend to people, and these are like arbitrary numbers based on my experience, right? If you don't have a full practice, to dedicate 5 hours a week to connecting with other people. That sounds like so much, but when you don't have a practice, that's like 5 hours of work a week. So that could be designing something in Canva, it could be writing an email, it could be calling somebody that you haven't seen since you were in, grad school together. It could be, there's just so many things, right? Going on a podcast, it could be chatting to people in Facebook groups. So there's all sorts of iterations of that, but documenting the hour and tracking that. And when our practice is full, dropping that down to 1 hour per week. And lots of people will say to me, that's still loads, 1 hour per week, that's 4 or 5 hours a month, that's still loads. But actually, if you're on social media or you have connections or you do courses or things like that, you'll find that super easy. So all I'm suggesting is tracking that time and giving yourself credit for the amount of effort you put in.
Right. And so you're also sort of describing shifting your framework, that your mindset, that work hours do not only mean face-to-face client work. Work hours mean admin time and networking and reaching out to other people and all of those different ways that you can do networking, and allowing yourself to own that as a business building activity instead of feeling like, oh, this is social time or wasted time. But I love the tracking too, because 5 hours does sound like a lot, but also when you have no clients, 5 hours of work and you're getting paid nothing, at least you're investing in your future. You're investing in the growth of your practice.
Yeah. And, I always say it takes, if you're going to do that, if you're going to put your 5 hours of work in, you've got no clients, you've got 2 clients, you've got 4 clients, you need more. And then you put another 5 hours of networking in every single week. Within 3 months, I reckon if you put that in and there aren't any other kind of holes or problems in the process, then within 3 months, there will be a massive increase in referrals, right? Usually much quicker, because people get to know us and then they'll remember us. And as long as we maintain those connections and we do all the follow-up and we do the sort of courtesy and we check in with them and we send them a resource that will be helpful and things like that, there isn't any reason, there isn't any reason other than kind of like all the usual ones, right? The location, the offer, the time of year, those sorts of things. But I do believe that putting that effort in, I believe it because, that's my experience. And making friends with a few very generous people has been really helpful for me. When I came to France, one of those people that I reached out to sat me down and went through my list with me. And she was like, oh yeah, you should call this one. And this one works with the university. And this one knows all the American expats. And this one, this. And she went through the list with me. She was very generous with her time. And then I've also done that for people who've moved to France. And I'm sort of maintaining that generosity and connecting with people who you can see that generosity of spirit, I think is really helpful. And with those people, I find it really easy to say, I need a bit more work. I could do with some referrals, Do you have anyone? Being able to connect with people where you can say, and you don't feel like vulnerable about that. You can say, oh, I've got some space. Can you send me some people? So I think that's been really helpful too.
Absolutely. And so having these connections and building your community and decreasing your isolation, that's really what all of us solopreneurs or solo private practice owners want. We want to have, all the joys of working for yourself are there, but we have to figure out ways to supplement those areas like isolation and loneliness and that feeding into imposter syndrome. And becoming, I love the idea of generosity. And that's part of what people sort of lose sight of in some of the Facebook groups, is that the admins of those Facebook groups are very generous. They're putting out all kinds of free content and things like that. And so you can jump in there and have a dialogue with someone you don't know about something that, they've asked a question and you have some really good input, and not just going in to ask a question when you need something, but looking for ways to show up for others and provide something of value to them. And they may remember you and you don't remember them at all. But again, you're planting all those seeds.
I remember when you and I met on a program, but I had already seen your name around, I had already seen you participating in different spaces. And I think familiarity and like being regularly showing up, participating, that has been really important in making connections, especially with distance. Like, we haven't met each other in person, but we speak often about lots of things, personal and professional, right? And that also means that there's all these other possibilities as well. So by connecting with people online, I'm a good referral source for people in like France, in London, in Italy, in the US, in Asia, in Australia. Do you know what I mean? I know people in kind of different places because I've met them online and I've developed relationships. I haven't just saved their website. I've developed relationships with them, right? But that also means all those people who are building businesses and who are creating things, not only can I support their private practice, but I have this opportunity to kind of support a wider vision. We all do for each other. And yeah, sometimes, Facebook groups are scrappy and sometimes they're a little bit vicious, but I think that the majority of people don't really understand the model of having a private practice, moving into online business and selling in order to be able to provide wider free support to create greater impact. And I didn't really understand that at the beginning either. And I had to kind of be explained to me exactly that way. And I think that when people understand that, Facebook groups are a little bit less scrappy,
Absolutely. And so I will say, me showing up on Facebook, and once I sort of got through like learning to brace myself for the ugliness that disappointingly shows up in therapist Facebook groups at times, I started seeing names, your name, a number of other people's names, and I loved what they had to say. They would reply to things I had to say. So when I'm posting something, those people are sharing it or liking it. But also, like you said, we have never met, and we are a part of a small group of therapreneurs that support each other. And I've only met 2 of them in person. And that was just sort of coincidentally. But I feel like we have really close, supportive relationships. And I know I can reach out and say, oh my gosh, you all, I'm having such a bad day. And I'm just like really struggling to figure out like, what my next step should be with this product, or, let me read you some copy and tell me what you think. And that is invaluable. And even if you're not looking to go into entrepreneurship, you want to remain as a solo practice clinician, those connections are invaluable. To have that person at the end of a really hard day to connect with and say, do you have a few minutes to jump on a Zoom with me? Because I'm really, it was an awful day and I really need that support.
Yeah, I think, after I've worked, I come from an addiction background. And so I've worked in treatment centers and agencies. And, when you come out of that environment, for me, I really was like, I just want to be on my own. I would like everyone to just leave me alone. I don't want to hear everyone's opinion about everything, And what happened for me was I started to push too much space. And luckily in the UK, we have a different kind of supervision consultation system where we actually have to, when we're a member of a professional organization, we have to maintain regular consultation. And so at least I still had that, that person, but I really found myself kind of creating distance and taking the solo practitioner idea to solitude. And at some point, I started to feel like socially starved in my professional capacity. And for me, that doesn't work, because when something terrible happens or happened to me, I need to be able to reach out to people who will understand and who will be able to share experience and support. And so that was my experience with several different occasions where I felt like, oh God, who do I call now? And I learned that very early in my career. And so I have maintained and managed and, expanded professional connections, not only for that reason, but and it's sort of, it's not like, I'm not saying like, you got to make friends just in case something bad happens or but my personal connections, my personal friends, my home, my partner, my mum, my whoever, they don't understand, and we cannot talk to them about most things. And so having social connection as well in the professional capacity for me is absolutely essential.
And I think you did a great job of describing the initial journey of a solo clinician, that you are, if you've decided to take this step, most likely you're a person who wants to do things a particular way. You know how you like it done. You don't want input from a lot of other people. You're sort of happy to have this independence and take ownership and feel proud of what you're creating. And then the loneliness sets in and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do now? And so that was a huge experience for me. And one of the main reasons I created the Collaboasis clinical consultation groups. And what I realized when I was early on in my solo practice was I need community. And so I joined a paid consultation group, and I was like, okay, this is the part I'm missing. These people aren't going to tell me what to do. They're not going to say, you're doing that wrong, but they're going to offer suggestions. They're going to help me with those old crap cases that we all cringe when we, have them happening. And so that is so important. And it can be such a painful journey for a lot of solo practitioners. So if you are a new solo practitioner listening to this, please take note that enjoy your independence, enjoy doing your thing, but also be looking ahead to building that community for yourself. And networking is a huge, wonderful way of doing that. And also, we are going to shift our focus now to Tamara's opportunity that she created. I'm not going to get into all the stuff. I'm going to let her tell you, but she created a fabulous opportunity last year for clinicians, and also people, I think, non-clinicians were participating on some level as well. And I'm going to let you tell us all about that.
Thanks so much. Well, I had this conversation with a friend of mine a few years ago who's also an entrepreneur. She runs an international nanny agency, and massive, hugely successful, and a kind of alternative like nanny agency. And she was wonderful. And we were out for lunch, and she said she'd done some coaching, and the coach had asked her, how many people do you want to help? And she was like, I don't know, 1,000 families this year. And when she told me that, I was like, I've got 12 clients. I just want to help 12 people this year. I just want to keep those people. And I thought, but hang on a minute. And it really got me thinking, well, what are the other ways? And I had sort of I'd created paperwork. I started doing webinars. Maybe I was hosting already Learn to Love online therapy, something like that. And I started realizing, well, there's this, when we help other clinicians, that helps their clients. So there's this sort of butterfly effect of impact, right? And so if we can somehow, this is why I'm talking about the model of doing some paid work in order to create more free resources so that there's more accessibility. And I like that model, particularly for impact. When I bought a bundle a couple of years ago, a course bundle, I realized that this was sort of, financially not the same, but impact driven. So really, in terms of like a value system, very similar for me. And so I thought I would take the concept of the course bundle, which is, prevalent and very popular in the online business world, but make it for therapists. And you're right, not all of the contributors are clinicians, but a lot of them are. And this year, there's a heavy emphasis on private practice and clinical skills. And essentially, it's about being able to provide people with access to more resources than they would individually be able to purchase, afford, or choose from. And so that is how I kind of came to the idea of TheraBundle. And it's also an incredible networking opportunity. I know from last year that loads of the contributors, never mind the people who bought it, but loads of the contributors have worked with each other, joined each other's mastermind, joined my mastermind, done collaborations together, created projects, done webinars, given each other coaching, so many things like that, which of course has helped private practice and online businesses. So there's always subtle benefits, even when it's not obvious, with collaboration and networking.
Yes, absolutely. And the accessibility piece is so spot on. When I bought it was a business bundle, course bundle, and I had access to these big names that I had seen, and their programs were way out of my price point for what I could afford. And I got a taste of their information, and maybe that caused me to buy an inexpensive course and get to know them a little bit more. But it gives you access to people who are really experts in certain aspects of work. And so then you start making the connections with those people as well. And but the gift of it is, for a very small fee, people are getting access to amazing resources. And you have even sort of upped the ante this year about the contributions and bringing even more value this year than you did last year.
Yeah, it's big. It's going to be twice as big. It's going to be twice as big this year. I'm excited. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to have to, I have had to limit. And so that has been quite difficult as a decision-making process, but it is twice as big as last year. And the offers are completely fresh. So I really had a set of rules for myself around the offers. We have a whole system around the decision-making process, which starts with prioritizing the topic, which and the offer, the offer itself, but also around the balance of the bundle and the topics, and who it's going to make sure that it appeals and that it's useful to as many people as possible, and also not doubling up on offers. So, for example, there might be, let's talk about podcasting. There might be a course about creating a podcast, but there might also be a course about being a guest on a podcast. So they complement each other, but they're not the same topic. And so that's kind of the stage that we're in at the moment. I think of bundles as sort of two launches. So there's a contributor launch where I'm looking for the people to participate in the bundle. And then there's the actual bundle launch itself, selling to bundle buyers, or TheraBundlers, as I like to call them. And so the contributor launch is it's very, very, very involved. And then there's loads of tech behind and creating the promo materials and all that kind of stuff. And then there's going into the actual bundle sale itself. And this is also one of the reasons why I really advocate for tracking the work that we do, because so much of the time we don't know what goes into a project. And when we don't know what goes into a project, we can't assess the profitability and the sustainability of a project. But I have, because I tracked all my hours last year, I know exactly how many hours it takes to wrangle 50 contributors. I know how many hours it takes to promote, to create the materials. And I know how many hours I'm going to have to pay my team, for example. And this is the same with private practice, but also with other ventures as well. So this is also one of the reasons why I talk about tracking our networking and all of the work that we do. You don't have to do it forever, but just so that you have the information on profitability and sustainability.
Yes. And as you were speaking, all these things popped into my mind that I want to make sure people picked up on. So one is that it's too late to participate as a contributor this year, but if people are considering doing it for next year, you walk us through it. Like, you were so hands-on. You even helped people with tech if they were new to, having a course that people could access. And you created a great community among the contributors, which was a huge benefit that most of us weren't anticipating when we participated. So if people are thinking, oh, this is something I'd really like to participate in next year, don't let that scare you away. You do need to have a course that you're currently selling. You can't just make up a new course and possibly there is some circumstances maybe that they would be selected, but typically
some wiggle room.
Right. Yes. But typically there are courses that people are already selling. The other thing is that I love your commitment to diversity with the bundle, making sure that we are representing all kinds of marginalized populations. And you put a lot of effort into that. And that's a behind the scenes thing that people don't see. But I know you and your values, and I know how extremely important that is to you to have representation in TheraBundle. And then the third thing that I want to really make sure everyone heard was that this is all new material. Like, sometimes I see bundles and I'm like, oh yeah, I've bought half of those things already. And you're saying that the courses this year are new courses. So if you bought TheraBundle last year, you're still going to find value in it this year, because not only are there twice as many courses or offers in there, but it's all new stuff.
Yeah, nobody's putting in the same thing. One person tried to apply with the same thing, and then they wrote to me and said, oh, I think I put that in last year. And I was like, yeah, no, it has to be something different. So it has to. So just working backwards, like, yes, everything's going to be fresh. Everything's going to be new. It's not in other bundles. I have an exclusivity clause as well in the contributor contract. So it's not going to appear in any other bundles in September and October. In terms of like providing help, I think that when we talk about accessibility, it's very easy to talk about creating accessibility by putting the price down to $100 instead of $3,500 or $5,000, which is the value of all the products together. For example, I don't know exactly how much, but let's just say, right? So it's easy to kind of talk about creating financial accessibility that way. But more than that, it's important to create accessibility for contributors so that we are not just talking about six-figure business owners with big lists participating in bundles. It's as important to me that people with 0 people on their email list who are starting their businesses also get to participate. People who don't have tech support and tech knowledge. And we're actually even providing tech support sessions during the testing phase to contributors. People have already booked in with one of the TheraBundle team to actually get someone to like walk through their tech setup and make sure that everything is smooth. And so it's just as important for me that the contributors have a good experience as the bundle buyers. And this is really like an energetic this is about intention. Like, this isn't, I hear about people doing bundles for list building or for profit or for this or for that. And this genuinely comes from a place of creating wider, deeper impact. And I think that if I provide support to the contributors and look after them, then the bundle buyers will feel that. So I'm very romantic. I'm very philosophical about it all. And the diversity aspect has been really important. I mean, because you've helped me a lot, and my masterminders and the contributors from last year have really helped with connecting me with a wider group of people to invite to join TheraBundle. And so I've pitched lots of people and I've had conversations and I've built relationships, and that was really important to increase representation for, people who don't feel represented in the therapy and online business space. And I'm what I would say is like, I'm still working on it, like, I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm much happier with the representation this year than last year, which really didn't feel good enough, and something that we've worked on all year. And so I do feel like more happier with it, but actually, like, it just shows that there's more work to do in the field with that. And I'm so grateful for the work of contributors, but also not even contributors from last year and my masterminders, but people who didn't even know that they were in TheraBundle yet. They'd applied. I hadn't even told them whether they were accepted. And some people wrote me long emails and long suggestions of like who would be a great fit, what offers they had. They connected me with them directly by email. And so it has already become a hugely kind of beautiful and impactful experience just for me. And we haven't even begun.
Yeah. And I think that absolutely reflects the changes we're seeing in our field. I talk a lot with my members about, therapists were always the white lady in the cardigan. And so people would be insecure as a therapist about, can I wear jeans or can I dye my hair pink? And what we've come to know is that people are becoming savvy about therapists and that they can find a therapist who looks like them or represents them in some ways or has values that they're reading on their website that match, that align with them. And so this is really an extension of what we've already been seeing in the field, is that we're letting people know there's all kinds of therapists out there and you can find the one that works best for you. And you don't just have to go with the first person that pops up on Psychology Today or the person that you referred to, but you can find someone who matches whatever aspect of yourself that you really find important, and you can find that. And so this is giving clinicians exposure who buy the TheraBundle, but also the people that are in it, to know who those people are. And so you can make those really important referrals. So we're kind of coming full circle to the networking. So now, these people that you can reach out to and say, hey, I get a lot of referrals for, someone who works with the LGBTQ community. And I know exactly the person to refer you to, or I'm really looking for a BIPOC therapist. And I have a number of people that I've connected with. And so let me get the information for you. And so we are really passing it on in a beautiful way. I'm kind of a romantic in that way too. And I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, me too. And I think, all the people that I've been connected with, we think about, maybe a therapist just knows one other therapist from their original course, or maybe they met them at a networking event or something like that. And now I would venture that I've probably looked at 1,000 websites over the last 6 months, figuring out who to pitch and, figuring out whether someone has courses and whether it's going to be good for them. Because also, people often don't know this about bundles, is the whole idea of a bundle is that then buyers will join your email list and you can continue your relationship with them. But if you don't have future offerings or you don't have multiple courses or things like that, then you just have a load of people on your email list. So I want to make sure that the bundle is going to be beneficial to people. And so when I go and do all this research, and it means that I've seen so many people. Now, I can't remember every single thing that I've seen, but I remember a lot of stuff, and I write down and I make notes. And so that does mean that actually I'm in a much better position to be able to say, oh, you want to learn about this? Well, this person teaches about it. You want to learn about this? Oh, I've seen a course. I know what to search for in Google. I know where I found it in Facebook, for example. And also, I think one thing that I haven't mentioned that is really beneficial, and I know you also know this, is that when we do courses together, like as therapists, we have an experience together. So like we did a program together. There are people in my mastermind group. I'm in another therapist mastermind group, and we get to know who we are, not necessarily because I'm telling people. Some people don't even know what my specialty is, right? But they know what I'm like as a person. We get to know each other. And all those people want to be in TheraBundle because they could see how excited I am about it and how cool it is as a project, and they want to help and they want to get involved and they want to spread the word. And this is how it works for private practice, but it works if you're moving into therapreneurship, if you're moving into other businesses as well. So I always say when people are like, I find it really difficult to network, I always say join a clinical consultation group, join a course, join a 6-month program, join a therapist support group where there is some form of structure. I need that as an ambivert. I need the rules. I need to know how I'm meant to behave. You can't just free me out in the world. I need someone to give me instructions, and then I can connect with people and I find it much easier. So those are I think that, I think those are always like a good kind of way in, basically.
I agree. And so people will sometimes worry, ambiverts or introverts, that, well, what if I show up and like they all know each other and I don't, and I can't really feel like I'm connecting. But most of the time people are in those groups because they want whatever is being offered, the coaching or the course or whatever, but they're also looking for connection. And so you're coming into something where people are likely looking to get to know more people, even if they know all the other members and you're new. They're looking to find out, who are you? What do you bring to the table? Like we have a similar interest because we're in this thing together. And I want to make that connection.
Yeah, I think that my go-to is always like, oh, what's your project? Like, what are you working on? What's your next thing? Because I find it, it's just like saying, like, who do you see in your practice? Who can I send to you? Maybe I'm not going to have that client for you, but if another colleague tells me that they're looking for someone for that client, I'm going to remember you. And it's the same when you're in a course or in a consultation group or in some kind of program. So my go-to is always like, what's your project? Who can I send to you? What are you working on at the moment? And that usually opens up. I mean, obviously, as we can tell, like I don't have any difficulty coming up with things to say, right? But I need some sort of context and framework.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those are important things. And I think that is something that possibly creates fear for people in joining programs and things like that. And they're not really looking at it from the perspective of, you're going to participate and probably help other people in some way, and they're going to help you in some way, and you're going to have this connection. And it might be just specific to that course, but it might be that, like you and I found my business bestie in the program we were in, and I wouldn't have met you otherwise. We, at some point, like we both saw each other around. At some point, we probably would have connected in some way, but the relationships that we built in that program were actually more beneficial. I can't say more beneficial, but just as beneficial than the program itself, because there was just a really cool group of therapists in there who were looking to grow outside of one-on-one work. And those friendships that developed were really important.
I completely agree. And I also want to say that, when we're not really sure of our role, something that I've learned, I work in addiction and I'm from a 12-step background. And something that I've learned from that culturally is that when I don't have a role and when I feel lost, that if I offer, like it's this concept of generosity, when I offer some sort of service, that gives me some kind of identity and purpose and meaning. And so, for example, if I don't know anybody and then I volunteer to be a greeter, for example, then I have a role. I'm meant to be doing it. And one of the things that you did when our program ended was that you volunteered to host regular calls. And we did that for a while afterwards. So we did it on your link. You made the Google Calendar. I still have it, even though we're not meeting anymore. Like I still have it come up every Friday, And so you set it up. So you put yourself forward as this person that was like, okay, I'm going to set up the link, the calendar, and I'm going to host the call and take care and give us some sort of framework and infrastructure. And I think that, being that generous of spirit, like being that generous means that like you're central, everybody knows you. It's easy to connect. It's easy to reach out. And so that's what I always say, like when we're feeling a little bit like out of the clique, when we don't really know what we're doing and everyone else knows each other, to like offer to do something, and that creates space for us.
That's a great idea, a fabulous idea. And that could even look like going to a conference and asking the conference person, do you need any volunteers? Because then if you're a greeter, every single person coming through the doors is going to see your name. And, probably if they're a shy person, they might approach you because they've already seen you and they know you're a volunteer. Maybe they're going to chat with you, and you're planting seeds. So the generosity piece is really important. And I think we are naturally generous in our field as clinicians, but we forget there are ways that we can use that will not only benefit us, but benefit other people as well. So
yeah, I mean, I love that. It reminded me, like, there's this famous addiction conference in the UK. And when I was first qualified, I couldn't afford to go to it. And so I wrote to them and was like, hey, can I just volunteer and come and stand behind the welcome desk? And the next year I was managing an aftercare facility, but it was a charity and we couldn't afford the tickets either. And so I said, hey, can I bring some more people and we'll all volunteer? And did they need the volunteers? Not really. But we all volunteered behind the welcome desk. And it meant that we made connections. And 10, 12, 13 years later, now I exhibited at that and presented at that conference. But I still met people that I had met 10 years ago when I couldn't afford to go there, you know? And I was really, like, I was taken care of really by the conference, and they really looked after me and made me feel so welcome. And so sometimes, like, we have to be a bit creative about that stuff. You want to go to a conference, you can't afford it, so write to them, ask them what you can do. You want to connect with a doctor and they won't give you an appointment, like, offer to go in and do a free training. You want to be part of a group practice but they're not interviewing anyone, I don't know, like, host something and invite them all to it. So there's all these different ways of doing things, and I'd love to do idea storming on all of those different, like, different kind of creative ideas of meeting people and creating infrastructure. But yeah, thanks so much for kind of letting me think about all those things again today.
Absolutely. And you and I can talk for hours and lose track of time easily. So this has been really lovely, but we do probably need to start wrapping up. It's been such a great conversation. So I want to ask you if you have a favorite catchphrase or analogy that you like to use with clients. And
they've all suddenly escaped me.
I can totally relate.
Something that I often say to people recently, something that I've been kind of relying on a bit recently, and it's a lesson that I've come to myself, is that we are all things. And I think this comes from really seeing people discovering and developing self-knowledge. And sometimes we come up against something that feels like very difficult, and maybe we receive some difficult feedback, or maybe we learn something about ourselves that we don't really like so much, And for me, this idea that, like, we are all things. I am honest and I'm dishonest. I am kind and listen, sometimes I'm unkind. And I am generous, but I'm also a bit mean sometimes, like, I am like all things. And all of those things were with me at the beginning, And so it's not really a catchphrase so much as, like, a little bit of, like, a generous spirit towards myself, like, give ourselves a little bit of flexibility to really understand, like, our values and who we are.
Yeah, that's such a great philosophy. We all need that. And we know as therapists that we don't do the things we tell our clients to do. And so having some self-compassion, understanding that we are all things. I love that. That was perfect. Thank you.
Aww,
so Tamara,
thanks.
really am so excited you finally came on. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Please tell the listeners where they can find out more about your offer and TheraBundle and any other aspects of your work you'd like to share with them.
Thanks so much for having me, Janine. And how long have I avoided it for? Like, how long have you been recording?
Well, I started recording last July and then my life fell apart. So
a whole year I've managed to, and always intended to. So thanks so much for hosting me and for making it super easy. I so appreciate it when a podcast host is, like, really, takes care of me as a guest. And I really, appreciate your time and also the platform to share about offers. If people want to come and talk to me about TheraBundle, then you can go to therabundle.com. You will find us on the website. You'll find us on Facebook. You will find us on Instagram. You will find us on Threads. And my courses and offers and coaching and things like that, you'll find on practicewithtamara.com. And if you want to have a little snoop around my private practice, you can find that at tamarahowell.com.
Great. Thank you. And we'll put those in the show notes. Yes. You have one more thing?
Yeah, there's one more thing that people who listen to podcasts that are interested in international therapy often find useful, which is that I have a safety checklist and Q&A download which is super easy to follow and gives people information when they get a client inquiry from abroad or when they go abroad. And so you can find that at internationaltherapypractice.com, and that's a free download.
And that's so important because since the pandemic and everyone being online, our world is so much more interconnected now. And so we do have people reaching out from other countries, or we're traveling and things like that. So that's an important resource, and free is always wonderful. Thank you for listening. There are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.